Steve Jobs was not just a name. He was a visionary, an innovator, and a person who redefined how the world sees technology. But do you know the struggles he faced and the lessons we can learn from his journey? Today, we're diving into the incredible life of Steve Jobs to learn English while uncovering his inspiring story. Along the way, we'll explore 9 powerful words that will enrich your vocabulary and deepen your understanding. In this first part, we'll focus on 3 words: visionary, perseverance, and innovation. Let's get started. Steve Jobs was born on February 24, 1955 in San Francisco, California. But did you know he was adopted? Yes, his biological parents were a young couple who decided to give him up for adoption. Right from the start, Steve's life was unique. This brings us to our first word, visionary. A visionary is someone who has clear ideas about what the future could look like. Steve Jobs had a vision for technology that no one else could see at the time. He believed computers could be personal, sleek, and easy to use, a revolutionary idea back in the 1970s. Steve's adoptive parents, Paul and Clara Jobs, were ordinary people. Paul was a machinist and Clara worked as an accountant. They weren't rich, but they made sure Steve had a good education. However, Steve was not your typical student. He was curious, creative, and sometimes rebellious. He dropped out of college after just 6 months, which might sound like a failure. But here's where we introduce our second word, perseverance. Perseverance means not giving up, even when things get tough. Steve didn't quit learning just because he left college. Instead, he started attending classes he found interesting, like calligraphy. He later said this was one of the most important decisions of his life because it helped him create beautiful fonts for the first Macintosh computer. Imagine that. Dropping out seemed like a setback, but his perseverance led him to learn skills that shaped the future of technology. Now, let's fast forward a bit. In 1976, Steve Jobs and his friend Steve Wozniak started Apple in a garage. Can you picture that? 2 young men working day and night in a small garage, trying to create something that no one else believed in. This brings us to our third word, innovation. Innovation is the act of introducing new ideas, methods, or products. Apple's first computer, the Apple I, was an innovation because it was one of the first personal computers. It wasn't perfect, but it was the beginning of a revolution. Steve Jobs' passion for innovation didn't stop there. In 1984, Apple launched the Macintosh, the first computer with a graphical user interface. This means you didn't have to type complicated commands anymore. You could just click on icons. Can you imagine how exciting that must have been for people back then? Steve's visionary ideas were becoming a reality, but his journey was far from smooth. You see, even visionaries face challenges. In 1985, Steve was forced out of Apple, the very company he helped create. Imagine how painful that must have been. But here's where his perseverance shines again. Instead of giving up, Steve started a new company called NeXT. He also bought a small animation studio called Pixar. At the time, no one could have guessed that Pixar would go on to make some of the most beloved movies in history, like Toy Story. Steve's story teaches us that setbacks are just stepping stones. His work at NeXT and Pixar eventually led him back to Apple in 1997. This was the beginning of a new chapter, where Steve introduced game-changing products like the iPod, iPhone, and iPad. These weren't just gadgets. They were innovations that changed the way we live, work, and communicate. Now, let's keep going as we dive deeper into Steve Jobs' life and discover more inspiring lessons and vocabulary. In 1997, when Steve Jobs returned to Apple, the company was struggling. It was on the verge of bankruptcy with outdated products and low sales. Many people believed Apple wouldn't survive, but Steve didn't give up. He quickly made bold decisions to turn things around. This brings us to our next word, resilience. Resilience means the ability to recover quickly from difficulties. Steve's resilience was remarkable. He cut unnecessary products, focused on innovation, and inspired his team to create something extraordinary. In 1998, Apple released the iMac, a colorful, all-in-one computer that became an instant hit. It wasn't just about the technology, it was about creating something people loved to use. But Steve didn't stop there. He believed in simplicity, which is our next word. Simplicity means making something easy to understand or use. Steve once said, "Simple can be harder than complex. You have to work hard to make it simple." This philosophy guided Apple's designs. Products like the iPod and iPhone weren't just advanced, they were simple and elegant. You didn't need a manual to figure them out. They just worked. By the early 2000s, Steve Jobs and Apple were back on top, but his life wasn't without challenges. In 2004, Steve was diagnosed with a rare form of pancreatic cancer. This was a devastating moment, but Steve continued to work and innovate despite his health struggles. This brings us to our third word for this part, tenacity. Tenacity is the quality of being determined and persistent. Even as he battled illness, Steve kept pushing forward. In 2007, Apple introduced the iPhone, a product that changed the world. It wasn't just a phone, it was a camera, a music player, and a computer, all in one device. The iPhone showed Steve's incredible tenacity to achieve his vision, no matter the obstacles. With resilience, simplicity, and tenacity, Steve Jobs transformed Apple into one of the most successful companies in the world. His ability to bounce back, focus on what matters, and stay determined in the face of challenges is a lesson for all of us. Let's continue exploring his journey. Steve Jobs' impact extended far beyond technology. His way of thinking, his creativity, and his ability to inspire others continue to influence millions. But as his health worsened, Steve began to focus more on his legacy and the values he wanted to leave behind. This brings us to our next word, legacy. Legacy refers to something valuable that a person leaves behind for future generations. Steve's legacy wasn't just the products he created. It was his philosophy of pushing boundaries and thinking differently. He once said, "The people who are crazy enough to think they can change the world are the ones who do." This mindset became the foundation of Apple's culture and continues to inspire innovators everywhere. In his final years, Steve Jobs also spoke about the importance of passion, our next word. Passion is a strong feeling of enthusiasm or excitement for something. Steve believed that loving what you do is essential to achieving greatness. He often said, "The only way to do great work is to love what you do." His passion for creating beautiful, meaningful products is what set him apart and made Apple a global icon. As we near the end of Steve's journey, let's reflect on our final word, inspiration. Inspiration means something or someone that motivates you to achieve or create. Steve Jobs was an inspiration to countless people because he showed what's possible when you combine vision, hard work, and resilience. Whether it was the iPhone, the iPad, or even Pixar's animated masterpieces, Steve's work inspired people to dream bigger and do better. Steve Jobs passed away on October 5, 2011, but his influence remains alive. His story reminds us to embrace challenges, stay passionate, and always aim for excellence. It's a story not just about technology, but about life and the incredible things we can achieve if we believe in ourselves. Now, let's quickly recap the 9 words we learned from his journey. Visionary. Someone with clear and inspiring ideas about the future. Perseverance. The ability to keep going despite difficulties. Innovation. Introducing new and groundbreaking ideas or products. Resilience. The ability to recover quickly from difficulties. Simplicity. Making something easy to understand or use. Tenacity. Being determined and persistent. Legacy. Something valuable left for future generations. Passion. A strong feeling of enthusiasm or excitement for something. Inspiration. Something or someone that motivates you to achieve or create. Thank you for joining me on this journey through Steve Jobs' life while improving your English. If you found this story inspiring and learned something new, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to our channel, Life Talks in English. My name is Jonathan, and I can't wait to share more amazing stories and lessons with you. See you in the next video.